Yeah. Hey, greetings and salutations, everyone. You have tuned into Global Recovery Today, and I'm your host, as usual, Walt Lusk, and we have a special guest in studio, Tyson Elliott. He's actually in studio. Listen to this.
All right.
They're thrilled.
Yes, and I'm thrilled to be home.
He's not in any undisclosed locations. We are a call-in show. We are here every other week here at Universal Broadcasting Network. You can catch us on Stitcher, iTunes, and Spreaker. And, of course, you can watch us on YouTube. And we've got a special guest here going to be in here in a second that Tyson's going to introduce. But Tyson is actually one of the co-founders of Global Recovery Today, where it's a group of like-minded folks dedicated to finding real solutions for addiction and the root causes.
Yeah.
What are we chatting about today, Chief?
Yeah, what are we chanting about? I like to start with a reminder of what the intention is. Why do we, what is it that we're coming together to do? And, I mean, the answer is to heal, right, to recover. And so then you got to ask yourself, what are we recovering from? What's the problem? And, you can have a lot of different perspectives on that, so I'm just going to share mine. And, and then we can pontificate and we can bring in some other callers. And
while you're on that thought, the call-in show, it's a call-in show. And if you want to get on air with us, you can actually call area code 323-524-2599. That's 323-524-2599.
Yes. And we do have, a caller in, a gentleman who's been, through treatment. He's going to tell his story a little bit. And he asked a really, really great question about, why we use certain medicines. And it made me think about this, what are we recovering from? And, the human condition of passed down dysfunction, whether it be a physical trauma that's passed down through a genetic marker that gets released through, epigenetics, which is the propensity for a gene to behave in a certain way.
Well, some say it's multi-generational.
Well, what's clear, whether or not you can draw the definitive lines, but the evidence is that we are products of our ancestry, and to the degree to which their experiences are coded into our genetics when we're born, and the environment and circumstances in which we are exposed to will actuate these sort of genetic propensities towards certain either preferences, behaviors, and reactions, unconscious reactions to experiences and to situations. And so when we start to wake up to realize that there's this whole unconscious operating system that is thinking for us.
Because since our subconscious never sleeps.
Yeah, so we've got all of these things happening on a neurological, biological level. And at some point in our lives, as we cycle through the human experience, we have, it was mentioned, a midlife crisis. We wake up and be like, why am I doing what I'm doing? I've committed all this time to this thing that really isn't me. And so the idea is that we're all at some point waking up, maybe even as a global entity, human entity, we're waking up past, the human life cycle. And what I mean by that is that each of us would have this little bit of awakening in our own human experience and then, flower out through retirement and then go about our way. Well, now as a species, human beings, we're having an awakening where we don't go back. It's not, people born in will no longer be born in to the unconscious trauma of the many generations that are passed down without any understanding and no processes for healing. So all of that being said, what's happening now is that we're starting to investigate all of these different healing modalities. Some have been around for thousands of years, and we're just now starting to understand why they worked and why did they do it that way? Why have people been drinking alcohol for so long? Why have people been using cannabis and any other sacrament that has been adopted by various, religious, programs, organizations? They almost all have this sacrament of something you take, and in this case, let's just say, we've been choosing to anesthetize through alcohol and psilocybin, marijuana. Every culture just about has sort of some psychedelic elixir that they could be taken at times, given by medicine men. So looking at why we deal with our stress, deal with our discomfort by anesthetizing, and what the effects are, is that we open ourselves up to actually relieve some of those things that we can feel connected. When I drink alcohol, I immediately feel like you're my buddy and I can talk to you. And that separation, that veil of separation is gone. And my lips get loose and I start talking about my problems and I can cry and I can emote, right? And it really is that thing that allows us to feel connected. So it can, it can be seen as a powerful medicine as well as a very destructive force in communities, because at the same time, it's not really being ingested in a way or in a environment of healing, right? So we're just out there partying with our buddies and we're drinking. We're opening ourselves up, but we're not really getting from it what could be the healing using these substances. Now, what's the difference between a medicine and a drug and a plant, right? So I think intention has a lot to do with it. And in all fairness, we did, by criminalizing many of these powerful healing medicines, what we've done is we've turned it over into the hands of one of the lowest common denominators, the criminal mind that's, using the drugs as for profiteering. And then, we're opening people up, and when they're in their most impressionable state, they're not, it's not being used in the sort of the way that it could be. So that I'm done now with the sort of opening up the show with the idea and the concept of, and it's a broad subject.
Yes.
And we're going to try to narrow it down. And I want to do that by introducing Eric, who was nice enough to come on the show. So maybe, Eric, if you like to say hi. This is Eric Kim.
Hey, Eric.
Hey.
There you are.
Right on. Hey. Welcome.
I didn't hear anything you guys were talking about.
No, you didn't. Did you have it on mute, or can you hear me now?
I muted it. I didn't know I was muting you.
Oh, okay.
There we go.
Okay. Well, we just did. I'm not going to go back over it again. You'll get a chance to go back and hear it, but it did sort of lay the groundwork for, how we use substances, for healing. And for much of our lives, we've been taught that drugs were a problem, and they become a problem when they're used in sort of just as an escape, but not with clear intention. So let's take a second and maybe just you tell us a little bit about how you found Ibogaine initially and got involved in it, and what was that like for you?
Well, for me, it was just to stop using, 20-year user, all types of drugs, but it really got heavy when I started doing opiates, which led to the use of heroin. And I just came to a point in my life where it had so much control over me that I needed to quit. And my biggest concern was the withdrawals, how tough that was going to be. And from my knowledge of what I picked up was that it would be able to eliminate virtually all of that. And it did do that. For me, I'm like the 3 out of 10 that you've mentioned in the past. And I didn't have that, life-altering trip or, awakening. It was just, something to get me off the substance. And it worked. It saved my life.
Beautiful, yeah. So, what you're talking about is that, there is a number thrown around, and in my, years and hundreds of people working with it, it seems pretty accurate. Three or so out of 10 are going to come out of the experience and not have what we call the visionary component, which is this sort of life review. Sometimes it comes in the form of, a higher self, Christ consciousness, Godhead, even past relatives, tiki men. There's some common ways that this entity presence comes to us, but it's pretty interesting because the message is pretty clear. It's about personal responsibility and it's a life review. And so, but with you, your experience was not that, right? So yours was.
No, don't get me wrong. For 20 hours or so, I was just out of my mind, but I didn't have any visuals or any, recall or, past traumas that I revisited or anything like that. It's just kind of like being out of it, I guess. And that's all it was for me. But the bottom line is, it got me off.
Well, was there any, like, once you were out of your 20-hour experience, was there any, like, what was your first reaction once you kind of came out of the cloud or the other side?
It was still tough. I mean, I would say the withdrawal was about 10% of what it should be. You have this leg shaking experience where you just can't go to sleep. So I didn't sleep for 4 days. And finally, they gave me some sedatives that put me out. And when I awoke from that, I was so refreshed. It was great. But then you go through depression, and so that's kind of a tough one. But you get past that. I think it's all depends on the individual, what it is, how they think or how they live, or, are you going to cry over spilled milk and just sit there and point fingers, or you just got to get over it and move on. And so for me, thank God it was enough,
There's definitely something to be said about, the individual's, you can say integrity or strength of character, or like that chutzpah, that thing that says, look, I'm just going to do this no matter what. And so I don't know what that is without sounding judgmental and, who's got it and who doesn't. And that's why I really, I believe that this venture is going to be successful in community, because some of us have it and some of us don't. And so if we can get together and support each other, for those that don't have it, they need encouragement, The other things that I've really found that help, because most of us just don't have it. If I could have done it on my own, I would have done it on my own. So I sought help. The medicine, like in Eric's case,
I couldn't have done it on my own.
Yeah,
just
right.
No way.
Yeah,
no way.
No.
I tried it many, many of times, and it just wasn't going to happen.
Yeah. And then you did the medicine, you went home. What was it like going home that first week or two? You still some withdrawals, you had a hard time sleeping. Give me an idea of that first week or two and what you did.
You're kind of just groggy, you're just really lethargic. You don't really have motivation to do anything. And, for me, it was almost 5 years ago, so I can't really recall exactly what it's like because I don't relive it in my head, but I do remember it wasn't tough to stay off. Like, you don't get the jonesing, for me at least, because I had it in my mind that I wasn't going to allow this to have control over me anymore. So that was a big thing, and the funny thing is I've actually found like little pieces of heroin here and there in my jackets as I was doing some cleaning, and I never slipped. Not once since.
That's fabulous.
Beautiful, Eric. That's what a great example. Fabulous. But what you're talking about, coming back and, it is amazing to anybody who's ever struggled with addiction to the degree that Eric and I have, is that the mind, like there's smarter me, the successful businessman that knows, no, I can't do this. I got to go to this job. And then there's this nagging voice that is telling you to go and use and escape, and you're going to feel better. And it will not leave you alone until you use. There's nothing you can do about it, right? Right.
Absolutely. I mean,
so to have that removed, that in and of itself just says, wow, can you really take a plant, a medicine, or a drug that is going to shift the way that I think? And that's what Ibogaine did for me. And I didn't even do it my first time really for an opiate addiction. I was working for another clinic. I was engaging people and helping them come to medicine, but I'd never done it. So I'm like, okay, I have to do Ibogaine. So I scheduled my treatment. And since I was a cigarette smoker, I had committed to letting go of cigarettes. Which
is very tough in itself.
That is one of the hardest ones. I mean, it's the lowest success rate, even with Ibogaine.
Really?
Because of the absolute nervous habit of doing it, the social
availability.
It's everywhere.
And the garbage
smell.
is in it.
But what I've learned in the process of all the different ways that triggers happen. So there are emotional triggers that happen based on a feeling. There's a situational trigger, which is like when I get into my truck. Every time I get into my truck, I light up a cigarette. So when when I was just a few days off cigarettes, just out of my Ibogaine experience, the first intense physical trigger, like craving that I had, was when I got into my truck. I got into my truck and I went to start my car, and I had this intense feeling of I should be smoking. I went to reach for my cigarettes, and I'm like, and I felt it in my body, and I could feel it, and I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, and here's the thing, I was prepared. I had trained myself that when first of all, recognize that I had just been triggered. And the second that it happened and I felt it hit my hand, I'm like, I was just triggered. I would train myself to pause. Don't move. Take a deep breath. Okay. And I say, I don't choose this thought. I didn't choose to want that. I didn't choose that craving. It just happened. But then I supplanted it. This is where I took control of my mental faculties, and I put in a mantra, and I said, I'm a non-smoker. I'm a non-smoker. And then I trained myself to do what's called consecrated action, or Dharma yoga, which is the next indicated thing. And so where am I? I'm in my truck. Oh, I'm going to the store. I'm putting the key in the car. And I just literally used my conscious mind to do the very basic, most automated, the most automated steps of the things that were in front of me.
The basic stuff you're doing right there.
That little practice that I just outlined, with or without Ibogaine or medicine, is how we are going to grow in consciousness and not maintain this sort of reactive emotional response to our environment. And as a collective, this is where the work is. This is what we're doing, right?
I do that all the time.
Yep.
If I have a Jones for a cigarette, or, if I start to think about using, I just tell my brain to focus on something else, and that's it. And
Good.
I just move on from that.
Yeah, you went the next week or two and started. Did you see anything else in your life that you felt like you needed to change? Like, what started to happen in your life to support your recovery? What did you start doing?
A big part for me was disconnecting myself from everything or anyone that was using.
Right.
I think that's an important, vital step. If you're associating with friends that still use or party or recreational wise, it's such an easy way to slip back in. And for me, that was just something I had to commit to.
Mm-hmm.
And so anyone that I knew that I partied with, their phone numbers were deleted, and that was it.
Yeah. And were you any other kind of program, any kind of recovery program, any therapy?
No, I went to one of those 12-step meetings, NA meeting, I think it was.
Yes.
And it just wasn't for me. It was this whole thing on God and letting yourself go. And, I'm not a religious guy, so. Mm-hmm. And I understand that God doesn't have to be like the Christian God or whatnot, mm-hmm. Just that higher being. But for me, that's a little bit too, hokey pokey for me.
Okay. So you just went about your life, which was work, and you were employed or employable at the time?
Yeah. I come from an industry where partying is kind of acceptable, if not considered kind of cool, Mm-hmm. It's in the fashion industry, and the more higher end that you go on the fashion industry, the kind of more acceptable that it is. And I just completely disconnected. I was in a position in my life that I was lucky enough to have sold my company at the time, and decide, and I had many offers to go back, which I've never even considered to going back. Mm-hmm. But, like I said, I just had to disconnect myself from anything that would trigger me back into using again.
What about your, many of us use substances as a response. We get in the habit of something, I know if I got stressed out, I would just want a cigarette, you know what I mean? Like would be something that I reach for. Is there something that you replaced it with? Is there anything that you found yourself when you'd get stressed out, or?
No, when I get stressed, first off, that's another way I changed my life is I try to put myself I try to live a way where I don't stress out anymore.
Yes. You stop creating it.
As possible. Yeah. I don't put myself in positions like that. I drop my ego, whereas, I'm not getting as pissed off or worked up about, stupid stuff that really has no meaning in life, although the rest of the world might beg to differ. But as far as I'm concerned, there's just, keeping yourself, everyone has to decide for themselves, I think, what works for them, and I've just made specific guidelines for myself. And I don't think I'm a common case. I think it's been a tough job, but it's been working.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And, exercise. I mean, I do a lot of bike riding, but I always did that in the past. So it's hard to say that was a substitute, to stress relief. But, it's just not taking the little things in life so serious that it bugs you anymore.
Yeah. And this was the part that I think you kind of missed when we were talking and doing an intro. You were on mute, and you had asked me something when we started about psilocybin and the use of it.
Right. I remember doing shrooms growing up, and every time I used shrooms, it was like a reset button on my soul. I can't really define what it did or explain what it did, but I just felt refreshed and good about myself. Mm-hmm. And I have a different approach on things, but my concern was, the use of, 5-MeO DMT. Correct. Or ayahuasca. Is that something that needs to be used every so often, like every year or whatnot? Mm-hmm. With shrooms, I know at one point in my life where I thought, pot or drugs or, anything organic, wasn't considered a drug or harmful. Like I never considered marijuana as harmful. So I thought, it's really healthy to do psilocybin every year, mm-hmm. And kind of just reset yourself. Mm-hmm. But now, with my approach, I don't want to be a hypocrite in life. And in my view, and from my statistics that I, picked up from, meeting a lot of people and knowing a lot of users, is that a lot of these drugs like marijuana are gateway drugs, and I know a lot of people don't agree with that it's not, but I think it opens a lot of doors for people to use. And so I don't use pot anymore, and I was a big advocate of smoking pot, mm-hmm. Something I did since junior high school. And now, I don't touch it for myself. I'm not opposed to those that believe in it or do it, just like I'm not opposed to people who go to church. If it's going to make you a better person, more power to you. It's just not for me.
Mm-hmm. So what I'm hearing in you, Eric, is a lot of the programming of drugs being a problem. Even the idea, marijuana being a gateway, of course it's a gateway drug. That's why we take it. We're trying to open up the doors of perception. We're trapped in our own minds and our own perception of this world that we're living in, and it's kept us where we're at, and we're trying to be connected and part of and evolve consciously. And so a lot of what we're carrying around in us is this war on drugs, this criminalization, this drugs are the problem, when the reality is that they were the gateway to freedom from being controlled by fear and by other things. So, yeah, what happened is that when you criminalize the drugs and put it in the hands of, people on the corner with no training, no ethics, no morality, young profiteering men and women that are hiding from the law. So you've created this whole seedy underground culture so that when people do take the drugs and open up the gate, this is what you're letting in, right? So so I would say that what you're really trying to discern is, when is it a problem, because its intention does make a big difference. If you're taking a substance in a ceremonial thing with a real intention of opening yourself up and inviting in some new way of seeing things, then you might find that this is a very valuable practice. And that's what we've been doing as a culture for many years. But when you do it habitually in a way of escaping when you come home, just like you would turn on the TV and watch, the I don't know, any one of the cheesy shows that somebody else's life. You know what I mean? What is it? Kardashians. Why do people watch that? You know, these other people's lives, and we live vicariously through that. It's escape. We don't want to face our own lives. We don't want to look at that. You know. Do you think maybe, you know, the realization that you had been using drugs to escape, and that pointing at the drugs is the problem, since you were able to get away from the drugs, you're like, the last thing I want to do is invite that back into my field?
You know, that's a question I've never been able to answer.
Yeah.
You know, for me, I just thought I was bored, you know, and I just wanted a different, you know, headspace that I don't know, just wanted a different feeling. You know, I'm not one of those people that was molested as a child or, you know, abused from a young age. You know, I don't really have any excuses for using, except the fact that I made wrong choices in my life. And escape, at a younger age, when I was adrenaline junkie and so forth, you know, there was just wanting to be in a different headspace. You know, maybe that is escape. But regardless, I mean, you know, those are decisions that I made that led to where I was, you know, and whatever I used to justify using them, you know, is where I landed,
right.
You know?
Well, and I think it does lend itself to your experience on how you were able to do Ibogaine, maybe not have a deep, insightful experience where you were to go do this review of your life and see these truths that, oh my gosh, I mean, this is why I was using. I was doing it to mask this trauma. You didn't have that, right? So what you had was culturally having been exposed to substances which were very much acceptable within your culture from work and, you know, maybe not your ethnic culture, I don't know. And we're going to talk a little bit about that too. But as far as the social peer group, right? Your
Right.
socioeconomic peer group, and then your work-based peer group that was acceptable and you were doing it. But there's the truth about addiction from a physical perspective. We're talking about chemical dependency, right? So there's chemical dependency, which, and any of them can be measured in quantity and frequency. So how often you take a substance, how much you take of it, and then your genetic predisposition. So you're going to have your genetic predisposition based on your generalizations through ethnicity and through your family tree that gets passed down. And it just means that if I drink enough, often enough, there's going to be a physical dependency, there's going to be a psychological dependency, and the degree to which it becomes a tool for me to escape and manage my life is where we have this mental obsession that is much more escapism. Does all that make sense? You see how each of those could be a way that you could be affected by substances, and all of them a little bit different?
Absolutely. I mean, don't get me wrong. Ibogaine, it may not have had that, you know, psychedelic awakening, but it did, you know, afterwards, you know, I was given a gift, and I don't doubt that for a minute, you know, that I was given an opportunity that I wasn't going to waste, you know, and to be clean and free of, you know, a chemical dependency like opiate. I mean, it's hard to explain to someone who's never had it, but that gift is unbelievable. You know, I mean, it's saved my life. I can't say it enough.
Yeah, and moving, going into where now you reached out to me wanting to basically think, you know, Ibogaine University, which was started by a group of people. I spent several years working in the industry and then started an aftercare, also Sanctuary, which is, you know, a dog rescue and recovery home for people that coming out of treatment had no place to go. Because what I saw was that people were being given Ibogaine, were taking away their coping mechanisms, and they're not like Eric. They don't have this underlying sort of ability. You know, there is a lot of just, you know, real wounded people with no tools and very emotionally immature, no maturity, so they can't go out and cope. They don't have a skill set. They don't have earning potential. They've got a lot of shame and guilt, and we just took away the one thing that defines them. What do you do now if I don't have drugs and alcohol, that thing that's been what I've been chasing for so long? So, to me, you're not no better off than being, stuck in your community as a drug addict. So the need to create sort of a place for people to grow up, a place for people to reconnect with whatever community, with whatever peer group that they're going to resonate with. And that's why Aftergain, which is, in the process right now of being built, and that's why when I got linked up with Ibogaine University, the first thing I was doing for them was starting to take their patients, because when you went, Eric, it was just 7 days and gone, right?
That's it. And that's what I didn't like. What you did to the place was right on point. I mean, that was taking responsibility, to the fullest. I consider myself a pretty lucky case. I don't think everyone's like me, and to let someone out after using Ibogaine and 7 days later, just throwing them out back in the world without any tools, without any, help or teaching or anything, any guidance is a bit irresponsible, and what you've done for the, Ibogaine University is just right on point. Whether I agree with the use of, hallucinogens or psychedelics, that's beyond, as long as it works, that's the bottom line.
Yeah, the judgment comes from that story. Again, we've been indoctrinated. There was a very specific agenda to criminalize, mind-altering substances, and it really is the battle for our consciousness.
Yeah, I'm not trying to criminalize it. I'm not opposed to it. It's
I know what I'm saying, Eric, is that's what happened in the late 60s, early 70s when Nixon passed a law criminalizing marijuana and psychedelics, because at the time you had the Vietnam War and LSD had hit pretty heavy, and people were putting flowers in guns and dancing in the streets and didn't want to fight the Vietnam War. And you can't have that.
More sense in going to war.
I agree. Again, I think you and I we're fighting on the same side of this one. So it happened. The bottom line is that there was an agenda. There still is an agenda, which is criminalizing these substances. And there's there's lots of reasons why it benefits certain, segments of established society to continue with that. But I'm not here to do that fight. That's not what this is about. And so I really want to, while I will deviate occasionally to support what's going on in your mind, because all I'm reflecting, what I'm hearing you talk, is this idea about, like marijuana as a gateway drug. Absolutely. It's a great gateway into what? Well, that is dependent on your intention and who do you surround yourself and what direction are you moving. And if you are in and around conscious community and you're utilizing substances as a gateway towards higher consciousness, well, then it's all about what's the impact on yourself and your community. Are you being of service? Are you? And I'm not even one of those guys who believes you need to be productive. I don't think we got plenty of productivity on this planet. I would like to see do less damage. Why don't we clean up the mess? Let's produce less. The less active person that needs to be constantly stimulated, is just as valuable as the super productive person. And again, these are all mindsets that have been established in us based on an intention. And when do we take our minds back? When do we wake up and start saying, oh, wow, I'm doing all of these things either conditioned on my parents' insecurities, which is much of what it is, right? Our parents told us we needed to do this, this, and this. And in order to really justify my existence, you better go to college. You better, play football. We all know the story.
Society did that. But yeah.
So, but this is when I asked the question at the beginning, what are we recovering from? We're recovering from so many generations of dreams that didn't get fulfilled. And so there's all of these generations of dreams and these expectations and these wounded souls. So it's a soul sickness. I mean, what we're really dealing with is these many generations of the human spirit trying to make up for lost time, trying to fix problems. And, The good news is that we can't go back and fix the individual experiences, but we can learn to forgive. And in that forgiveness and in that ability to be like, oh my gosh, this is what happened. I forgive you and I forgive myself. And we move on from here. I believe, is the real recovery, right? And that's what I'm banking on. I'm banking that if we start practicing the art of forgiveness and we do that through kind acts, right? We start to be kind to each other. We start to find places in our community, in our lives, where we can be of service, where there are people and animals or plants, any kind of life that's in need of some stimulation, some sunlight, some water, right? And then we get called out to be more of that thing that we want out of others, and then if we do that, if that's our focus, not on getting a college education or producing or, avoiding a dependence on a substance. Think about how much
utopia.
Well, it's a very individual experience. I think it's available to each of us, right? As an individual.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's definitely, dependent upon the individual.
And I'm hoping that we, right now, this process of building small groups of people to get together on a daily and weekly basis, utilizing, platforms like, there's Meetup. You've heard of some of these things. The technology is out there. And so what we want to do is refine it. There's 2 websites, Global Recovery Today, which will be a resource-driven platform for people to come and sort of share ideas, and all like-minded people looking for, to be in part of recovery. And then there's Aftergain. Aftergain is the one where Eric and I, have this sort of, we came from it. We've been in it. We've seen the real need for something. And the Aftergain is very specific to give people post-Ibogaine a place to come and to continue being part of a community and reflect, and if they have an opportunity to be of service, that's going to show itself too, And so that's starting to really gain some steam. We had our first teleconference this past weekend where people were invited to come in and just share their ideas on, what they might want to do to be a part of it. And so now there's going to be 2 types of meetings starting up. There's going to be check-in meetings where people are literally taking the medicine. What is the medicine? Staying connected, being in community, establishing relationships with people that hear our truth. And then the second type of meeting is a strategic one where we actually have practical steps that we can do to bring this utopian vision to fruition in our own experience. So the groups are going to be modeled not after like a 12-step program, but kind of out of the why is 12 steps so successful is because there's a place where you can go with people that are sharing, what Bill W. talked about Alcoholics Anonymous, the reason it worked, and what the miracle in Alcoholics Anonymous is, and it's one alcoholic talking to another. Now, if you can take that same relationship and I can say it's one, 14-year-old basketball player talking to another 14-year-old basketball player, they're going to have that in common and they can have their little moment of, I see me and you see me. And so this seeing each other is where we feel connected. And, we all have different values. We all have different things that drive us. And if we can start to create a platform where people come together, like-minded people get to feel connected and share, then we have less propensity to feel isolated. We're probably going to get less sick. We're going to be less depressed. And my bet is that we seek substances to the point of, detriment much less. I mean, I believe that's the case. I see it working in many lives in 12-step programs. But we've also taken this God thing, like you said, Eric, and many people don't want to do 12-step programs because of the Judeo-Christian God that is very present in that specific structure you're talking about.
Right.
Yeah, but the benefits of the process, I think, we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Yeah, you called me with an intention to get involved in your community, right?
Absolutely. One thing for sure is to try to get them young, where it does, I think, in my opinion, is going to do the person the most good, is to, like you said, a lot of people have some type of trauma or something that they're escaping from. And to be able to get to that core in a young individual, I think is just, I think it's really important. And for me, I mean, there's a huge Korean community or Asian community out there that is kind of ignorant because it's, the use of drugs or, even to speak of drugs is kind of taboo, and there's just such a huge, a large community of users that are Asian American that are young. And parents especially that don't know what to do, that are crying out for help, but have nowhere to go. One thing is, a lot of them don't even speak English. So they have no outreach, and to be able to fill that gap and come in there and provide that help, and that knowledge, I think is really, really important, and I say that because I didn't realize how clueless a lot of these people were. Like, they didn't know anything. Like, they just thought you had to go to a regular hospital, if you were on drugs, either they could just stop using, which, if you're an opiate user or, that's all near impossible to do, cold turkey. And they just really have nowhere to turn to. They have no one to talk to because it's taboo. They're not going to, parents aren't going to call their friends up and say, oh, I think my kid's using drugs and how do I get them off? It's just kind of shameful. And I know that makes no sense. Like, why should anyone be ashamed of that? But in the Asian community, it's really, really frowned upon. And it's sad that it is, but that's the reality, And so when a community or, ethnicity is so kind of, I hate to say it, but kind of ignorant, it's just, it's crippling, and so they really have nowhere to turn. And so there's just a huge, huge gap there. And I don't see anywhere, whether I've looked at newspapers or, anything, and there's just nobody bringing awareness there. So it's very rare.
Yeah. I was in many rehabs, and one of the more, holistic, the higher end, I believe $20,000 for 30, 60 days. No, this was in Santa Fe, New Mexico. I don't even remember the name of it, but they had somatic and you were using EMDR, and it was for trauma. I mean, there had become clear in my life that all the attempts and all the abstinence and all the meetings and all of the 12-step work, I was not getting better. That the second, I could not deal with life on life's terms. It was too painful. There was an inability in my brain. My brain was, I was uncomfortable. And I knew that if I went and I took the substance, I would feel better. And I couldn't not do it no matter how bad the consequences were. Because I could always recover. I was intelligent. I was hardworking. I had my business. And while, I might end up in a hotel room for 3 days, smoking crack in my underwear and, hallucinating and having to call somebody to come save me, I'm pissing brown because my kidneys are shutting down, right? And then I would get in my BMW and go straight to work and like close a few deals and pay for the whole banter and recover from a couple days of sleep. And then, and I would be drinking a fifth of vodka a day, showing up for work every day and just wait for me to end up in a hotel room again. And this was, something that I couldn't, no amount of intellect, no amount of, periods of sobriety could really keep me from having, this breakdown. And for me, no amount of plant medicine is going to fix that either. I literally have to be actively working in and around recovery and stay humble. And it's hard, man. Like, I keep wanting to take it back. I want to be the guy who's doing all these great things, but that's what's going to be the death of me. I got to get back to the real basic stuff of helping the, like the dogs really help with me. I feel really grounded when I'm working with animals because they can pay me back in the only way that's really important, which is unconditional love, right? And so, with the human beings and the people, there's so much it's so complicated and so much gets tied up in it. And so I almost feel like I do the people work so that I can take that energy and help the dogs. It's not the other way around. You know what I mean? It really is like, where because they're the ones that can go out and on such a great level, they can love anybody and it doesn't require anything. When I have
that unconditional love that, dogs give to you, or animals. And I know that story all so well, including the 3-day hotel rooms.
Yeah. How the animals.
It doesn't matter how smart you are or how strong you are as a person. When it's got you in its claws, there's just nothing you can do to pull away. I considered myself an extremely sharp guy, very perceptive and understanding. But yet, I know that story also well. Like 3 days, calling up some girls, getting a bunch of dope, and just I couldn't say no for the life of me. And it absolutely makes no sense to me now how I couldn't do that. But when it's got you in its grips, it's something you just can't understand. It's got you. Yeah.
I would liken it to living in a neighborhood and there's 3 streets and they each go somewhere differently. And if you enter the neighborhood and you take the first street every time and you never know what's in the second or third street, you're always going to take the first street. And if you go past the first street and try the second when you like it, but you have a habit of going in the first street, most of the time you're still going to go to the first street. You literally have to change and break the habit and not do it a number of times and take the other one regardless of the outcome, right? So this is about the taking behavior to make a neurological shift, which is reprogramming our brain, right? And so there's a number of ways we do that. We can do that and we can simplify or expedite the process by taking psychedelics. Psychedelics, what do? They permeate the blood-brain barrier. They take what happens in our natural human, what we call a flow state. So I get into a flow state, which is I have an intention. I'm going to go try to do this objective, and I'm going to do it with a certain amount of emotional verve and with consciousness, or I'm just going to be completely surrendered to this situation, or I'm going to say, oh my gosh, this is where I get in trouble. It's after work. I just got paid. I'm going to go do this stupid thing. How do I interrupt this flow state when all of the pleasure reward parts of my brain are telling me you want to go down this street, right? So one of the things obviously is you got to take yourself out of the environment. You can't be in the situation. You can't have the friends. You got to literally have a plan to be doing something else. And, all of these little tricks that we do to stay sober or get sober, can be supported with medicine work if it's done with intention. And I use the term medicine. You can say drugs, plant medicine, any number of things that really is about, what's the intention, what's the environment, and, who are you trusting to facilitate that process. And lots of great practitioners out there. It's not just, the clinic that I'm working with. There's so many great ones. And so I just want to invite people to continue, tuning into this show and any other show that talks about, ways in which we can all recover, whether it be utilizing plant medicines or, there's so many great modalities out there. It's just a matter of deciding that you need to be part of a recovery process. And then, like Eric, pick up the phone and make a call and then bam, next he's on a radio show.
No, you're right. I never really thought of that, but maybe reaching out to you and telling you I wanted to get involved was part of my recovery.
It is, yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, I'm glad you did.
We've only got a few more minutes, Eric. Is there anything you want to say in closing to anybody who, that you haven't said that you think you might want to say?
Just, if you're just feeling doubts or you're just listening on the show and, you're an addict yourself, you got to make that first step. You really do. And that's about it,
Right on. Yeah, and the first step would be to pick up the phone and call me. I give you my direct line, which is 310 310-467-6783.
One more time.
310-467-6783. And they can also go and check us out at Tyson or info at ibogaineinstitute.com. Notice that we are now going to Ibogaine Institute, which if you are looking for treatment, you can check us out online, or you can just pick up the phone and call me.
There you go.
That's it.
So, hey, Kim, thanks so much, Eric, for being a part of the show.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Eric.
Thanks so much
Peace
for
and blessings,
contributing,
brother.
We'll keep us posted, and we'll stay in touch.
Thank you.
Hey, God bless.
Bye-bye.
Well, anything else you want to say, Chief, before we close out?
Yes, for those that are looking to get active, whether you're pre-Ibogaine, post-Ibogaine, and you just want to get involved, do pick up the phone and call. Aftergain.com is going to be sort of a hub for, community building, for resources for people looking to get into treatment or looking to stay in recovery. So please, we're looking for anybody who knows guys any program. You can help with building the websites. We also are going to be doing a hotline. The hotline is for people that, if you're at post-treatment and you just need to talk to somebody, we're going to everybody take turns being available for people to help support,
Awesome.
That's going to be a free, toll-free, This is all nonprofit work, by the way.
Oh, of course it is. Yeah, of course it is. Cool. Well, folks, you have tuned into Global Recovery Today here at Universal Broadcasting Network, ubnradio.com. I am your host, Walt Lusk. We, of course, got Tyson Elliott and Eric Kim, who is a phenomenal testimony. 5 years sober.
That's it, baby.
Man,
right?
Never went back. And he only had, 10% withdrawals from it?
He said that he felt, about of the 100% of withdrawals he would feel by getting it, he felt about 10% of that. So 90% of it was removed from the Ibogaine, and he didn't have the deep visions that many people have to say, oh my gosh, this is what I'm using, I should just stop. He actually had to work the mental toughness of not going back and changing his behavior. He's a great example of,
5 years.
Yeah,
it's
possible.
Can't. Of course, he changed his whole environment when he got back. He, deleted all the important phone numbers and, changed some habits and stuff. But bottom line, it's a phenomenal testimony. Absolutely. Thanks so much.
All right.
So tune in next time. You can reach us on Stitcher, iTunes, YouTube, of course. Please like, share, and subscribe. And, of course, here at UBN Radio Network. So we're going to close out until next time. God bless everyone, and thanks a lot for being involved.